Classic varietals that will pair with the season.
Thank you.
So Fernando, you getting ready?
Yes, thank you.
Very welcome.
Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
How about this? What a beautiful backdrop in Chicago. You gotta love this city. Please give a round of applause to the organizers of this event, the wineries that are participating, all the sponsors. This is really unique. I mean, like, people are going, you have an amazing city, and drinking wine on a Friday night after work, this is so much fun. I can't wait till 7 o'clock when this is over, heading right to that booth over there, taking your tickets if you haven't used them. So again, Todd introduced me. I'm Fernando Beteta. I'm a master sommelier here in Chicago, one of only 173 in the world. So I'm very humbled to be here and happy to share everything I know. When they asked me to do it, they said, just share everything you know. I said, that's easy. It's only about 5 minutes. No, seriously, they just had the exam 2 weeks ago, and one talented woman passed. 48 people took the exam. It was her third time. So it's a very rigorous exam. I had to taste a lot of wines over the years. Tasting, writing everything down, and keeping notes is very important. I would go to tastings like this, and I'd geek out, get a little book, write down everything that and this is great. I was looking at the Wine Taster's Glossary. I mean, they have words here like acidity, aftertaste. I mean, it's really kind of fun if you combine them. You can do things like crisp, dry, fruity. You can do earthy, tannic, fortified wine. Big, fat sommelier. No, that way. that doesn't go that well. But it's really good to write things down, and then it helps you recognize varietals, because it's a way to build your vocabulary. It's a way to if you're blind tasting to know one varietal smells like this, one smells like that. So pretty fun. So I have my partner here who's going to be doing the sake tasting afterwards, Eric, one of the leading authorities in sake. I mean, this gentleman knows just about as much as anybody in the world on sake. I've heard him lecture. Very interesting subject. So if you stick around, you'll learn a lot. And he's very approachable in the way he does it. So he tries. My theme today, I wanted to talk about fall in love. It's a season. You start changing. If I would have done a rosé tasting, I don't think I'd get as many people as I did now. And the wines, the weather starts to change. Things that we eat change. We're moving from crisp and grilled food and seafood to more roasts and braises. So obviously our wine selections are going to pair better in this fall. So I went through a couple of my favorite varietals. I thought that would be really neat to share with you. So if you have your first wine here, this is a white wine. Usually you think of white wines as a summer thing, but think of places like Germany. Some of my favorite varietals in the winter are Riesling and grapes like Marsanne and Roussanne that have terroir and earthiness. This is a Chenin Blanc grape. If you look at it, it's a very pale, but it has a touch of gold to it, and that's typical of the varietal because it grows in a cool climate, yet it has a golden skin. This is from the Loire Valley in France, which is a beautiful, picturesque region. Actually, it's the land of castles, and cheese. And Charles Perrault, when he wrote Sleeping Beauty, the fairy tale, he was inspired by the castles that are there. And you can still go. It's one of the most beautiful wine regions in the world. And it's very diverse in styles. And Chenin Blanc is called the chameleon grape because it can make many different styles of wine. So you have sparkling, you have dry, you have off-dry, you have sweet wines, you have really a diverse one. This is going to be that off-dry style, which has a little bit of the sweetness to it, which is perfect for when you want to pair things like root vegetables and duck and game, and you start putting out cheese. You want to have a little bit of richness to it. So I think if you smell the wine, it tends to have a lot more like apricot and stone fruit notes. Do you kind of get that? It's not crisp and green and lime and citrus as you would expect with a Sauvignon Blanc, for example. It doesn't have sort of that white pear that you get in Chardonnay. It has a little bit of honeycomb, so it's really, really unique. And then when you try it, let me finish mine real quick. When you try it, you immediately get the sweetness. But if you wait a second or two, maybe after 5 seconds, your mouth actually is pretty dry. It's like the acidity is working there to sort of even out and balance the wine. So it's fantastic with food because dishes that have, or think of cheese that has a lot of salt, that sweet and saltiness is perfect. You don't want to pair like a blue cheese. Actually, you've heard of Roquefort. Roquefort is from the Loire Valley, and they're caves, and it's a very spicy, salty cheese, and it goes perfect with like sweet wines like Sauterne, just very sweet. In my opinion, it's almost too lush. Or you can pick an off-dry wine like Riesling or Chenin Blanc to go with it. It's very lively. So Chateau Montcontour, it was built in the 15th century. It still exists today. It's right on the Loire River. It's a beautiful place, and some of the wines that they make are just priceless. I think they're very good. Excellent. So we'll start pouring the next wine. Yes. And if you have any questions about tasting, I have a Google on my phone, or I can answer a little bit about just general things about grape varietals.
Sorry.
Some of the other regions I tend to look for in white wines would be Alsace. If you like Alsace, and it's a very region that is, you think of it as being cold because it's in the sort of boundary of Germany and France, but it's actually a very warm region and produces very aromatic varietals like Gewürztraminer and Muscat, Pinot Gris, all delicious varietals, and they go with dishes like pork and duck and smoked meats. So excellent for the summer. Probably a great Thanksgiving white wine.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to that.
Yeah, some of these wines that we're doing for the seminar are here right now. We have a stand with other wines so you can sample them, but you're welcome to come up afterwards and try them again. Right, this next wine that we have is probably one of the most planted grapes in the entire world. This is coming from Spain, and the grape's Garnacha, which is Grenache in France, and it's a very spicy, thick-skinned black grape that produces a lot of power and a body to it. And if you look at it, it has this deep ruby color, almost like a purple hue to it, and the reason why it's darker is there's a lot of sunshine. And in the south of France and Spain is just immensely, it's a warm region, and just like people, you get more pigment in the skins, and the more pigments, the darker the grapes get, and that creates color, but it also creates bouquet of aroma and tannin and so forth. On a recent trip I went to Argentina, they explained to me when you go up the Andes, it's very high up, and for every 100 meters, right, that you go up in altitude, you drop about 1 degree in Celsius, which is in Fahrenheit. It gets colder. So it's like being in a mountain where you're skiing and it's very bright, but it's also cold. So the grapes get a thicker skin, and Malbec is so dark when you look at it, but it has acidity because it's so high up in the mountain. And so this grape varietal has a thick skin, produces most strawberry, cherry flavors. Sometimes you get this black pepper note to it because it has a spiciness. So this particular wine, Granate, is from Campo de Borja, which is sort of the center part of the country, and they use 80-year-old vines. And why the vines have to be older? Well, they let them grow kind of very naturally. Instead of training them like you would see a picture where they have the vines shoot up and then they have a wire, they just let them grow. Less maintenance to actually train them, but painstakingly harder to pick them because they have to pick them off the ground. And they have these little bushes, and they call it bush vine training, and you have really like gravelly soil and very rocky, and it's hard to walk around, but that is great for drainage. It's great for retaining heat in the cold night, and it gives a little character to the wine. It's also aged for about 8 months in French oak, so that's where you get a bit of that vanilla and cinnamon and cocoa. So this is a good wine that I enjoy with hearty dishes like braised short rib. You have a little bit of the tannin, but the weight, it shouldn't be tart because the varietal in general is a little bit lower in acidity. So if you don't particularly like Pinot Noir because it's too tart, you can go with Garnacha, which you can find pretty much all over Europe. It's a fun grape. What do you think of this wine? It's good? It's very nice. This is a banging deal. This is one of my favorite regions to go to whenever I think of red, bold wines is Spain, because naturally they produce a lot. Does anyone know the most planted varietal in the world? Just wild guesses. I like to hear. Zinfandel, maybe in the United States or California. You think Chardonnay, Cabernet, these varietals are pretty popular. How about Irene? Anybody heard of Irene? You don't see it on the shelf. That is the most planted varietal which outnumbers all the plantings of Cabernet Sauvignon in the world combined. And this is a varietal they usually make for fortified wines, so like an alcohol that they make. And this is usually grown in the heart or around Madrid in La Mancha. And it's a white varietal, just planted bulkily, usually done in a pergola style, where they let the vines grow, you know, like above the seal, so they can still plant other vegetables underneath. So they tend to produce a lot of grapes. Spain is still one of the most, well, it's the first or the leading producer of grapes in the world. Italy is still producing the most amount of wine, and the United States is catching up to both of them pretty quickly. So, Garnacha, fantastic, great stuff. This is Granate from Aleta, so that's the winery. It's pretty cool. All right, we can start with the next wine. Let me tell you a little bit of story about how I found this wine. Earlier this year, Wines of New Zealand invited me and my wife to go to New Zealand, and they said, "Are you willing to come?" And I said, "Let me check my schedule. It's clear." Yes. We're going to do a Pinot Noir tasting. It's held in Wellington. It's every 4 years. You know, we really want to sell to America because, I mean, realistically, New Zealand only produces about 4% of the entire world's production. And, you know, everybody's heard of New Zealand wines, but they associate it with Sauvignon Blanc. They're like, we really want to showcase how we can make diverse amounts of varietals and styles. So they pretty much gave me the grand tour of the whole country. And it's a small country and not a large population, but if you looked at it geographically from the southern tip of the South Island to the northern tip of the North Island, it's so far apart that it would be like the northern tip of North Africa all the way to Paris. So you can stretch, you know, really hot climates to very cold and mountainous, so they can pretty much grow almost every varietal, and they're doing it pretty well, because these are, you know, winemakers that are mavericks, and they're just learning and they're studying in England and London and they're UC Davis. And my final day, I was very impressed with their Pinot Noir and their Sauvignon Blanc. We were in Auckland ready to take the plane back. They said, "You have time to take a ferry to Wahike." I'm like, "What?" I was like, "Wahike, it's a tourist island, just 45 minutes ferry, and you can go check it out. They make pretty cool wines." And so we did it the next day as our like last day, and it was the most beautiful little island, very tropical. So we had been in sort of this cool weather, and we ended up like people in, you know, sandals and shorts, and this is January, you know, so they're in the middle of summer, and it was very hot, and I'm like, how do they grow grapes, and where do they grow them? They drove us to the other side of the island, and there was Man O' War Bay. And Man O' War Bay gets its name from when Captain Cook was sailing through New Zealand. He discovered this bay that grew the quarry trees. It's a natural tree, and he said, you know, I'll use those for masts for the Royal Navy. So he set up water station and a war station, and then it became Man O' War. And just beautiful wines, really rich and complex. And I was tasting them, and they basically let them grow in their own plots, and they have over 90 different plots where they grow Cabernet, Merlot, Chardonnay, Syrah, and this is a Bordeaux varietal, so you wouldn't expect Sauvignon Blanc to really flourish there like it does in Marlborough, which is a little cooler. So this is warm, and it's perfect for the varietals. So they have about the same temperature as Bordeaux does, the same amount of degree days. So you have this great development of fruit, great development of the spicy notes. And if I tried this wine blind, I wouldn't know where to take it. I'd say maybe California, Argentina, but it doesn't have the alcohol or the weightiness. It still has this freshness and acidity, which kind of brings it all together. And that's what I like to talk about, structure. You know, you need structure in a wine. A friend of mine sort of explained that to me. He said, well, how do you balance, you know, he said, if you have a wine that's just full of alcohol and fruit, that's like your muscle, you know. And if it doesn't have acidity is like your backbone, your structure, your skeleton, you would just be really flabby and just like, this wine is not good, really jammy. And yet, on the other hand, if it didn't have the fruit, the alcohol, the body, and it was just, you know, tart and just very skin, it would feel like a skeleton, just very austere and astringent. So the key when you're making wine and you're just growing those grapes is to get the balanced structure. And I think these wines really showcase that. So hope you enjoyed these wines. Love to answer any questions in the next 2 seconds. No, really appreciate it.